Coming up on this episode of One-on-One Sports.
Another one bites the dust as Coach Boeheim feels the wrath of the NCAA.
Plus all you need to know about the NCAA's conference tournaments.
And we provide our take on the NBA MVP race.
All that and much, much more, and it all starts right now.
Welcome back to another episode of One-on-One Sports. I'm Steve Normington, and I'm going to flake out on the show like Frank Gore flaking on the Philadelphia Eagles. I'll see you later.
It was good while it lasted, I guess. I'm Preston, Willett, and here are your starting five. Syracuse head coach Jim Boeheim has been suspended by the NCAA for 9 games next season. In a statement following the sanctions, Boeheim said, "The committee chose to ignore the efforts which I have undertaken over the past 37 years to promote an atmosphere of compliance." Steve, does Boeheim deserve to be given the benefit of the doubt and also welcome back?
Well, this has been going on since 2001. Obviously, he's saying it's a rogue YMCA official. How much can you really trust, though? It's been going on for that long. It's like Roy Williams saying he didn't know anything going on at UNC. I have a little bit of doubt. As great as his track record is.
You're not giving him the benefit of the doubt here?
No, I'm not. I'm not giving any college coach the benefit of the doubt. This is a guy that's been in the program
for, like he said, 37 years. And unless I've missed something and I've been under a rock for the past 37 years, but like unless I've been under a rock for this time, when has Syracuse become the poster boy for poor misconduct in the NCAA? They have never had trouble with the NCAA before. And if we're talking about one player, Fab Melo, that has multiple issues over the course of time, it's more than it's just a player, not a team, not a culture.
It does seem to be isolated. He's always one of those guys that's mentioned in the same breath as Coach Krzyzewski and other greats. But the football program, that's more damning because of the steroid accusations that they were tipping off players for tests. We could see some lawsuits down the road. While college athletes continue their fight for compensation, a new crowdfunding website, FanAngel, is making it possible for fans to pay college athletes to stay in school. The money will be saved for the athletes until their college eligibility runs out. 80% goes to the player being funded, with 10% going to teammates and another 10% going to scholarships. Will this be enough to actually keep athletes in school?
Yes, but with a couple big ifs. If this site keeps going, because a lot of times we see sites like this come up and then they just wash away in a couple days. But another big if is, if they get the proper funding. I don't know how much money fans are going to be willing to spend on, say, like a Marcus Mariota staying in college for longer.
I think this is huge if it goes through for the Big Ten, because we all know how crazy those fans are.
They got a lot of fans, yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. The NCAA has already issued a decree essentially outlining these sites. Fotick or whatever his name is, the guy who invented it, already sat down with the NCAA and lawyers to try to figure something out. I don't think it's necessarily against the rules because it's after they're graduating. They're getting the money,
they get the money
but it's still planning.
They get the money after they graduate, so it violates no NCAA bylaws. So that's the main point right here. And if we were waiting around for something that the NCAA does like regarding to money.
This is it. This is it right here.
Yeah, this is the only solution to the money issue for right now until they get athletes compensation. As NFL free agency begins, the state of the running back position in the league is under question. Former leading rusher Maurice Jones-Drew retired from the NFL at only the age of 29. And the Philadelphia Eagles sent star running back LaShawn McCoy to Buffalo for an often injured linebacker. Former Atlanta running back Steven Jackson has started a campaign to save the running back. Steve, in the current state of the NFL, should teams invest highly on these running backs?
No, teams should not invest highly in running backs at all whatsoever. They only have a real 2-year shelf life of being at the top of the league. Then you see their production start to drift off. Typically, from ages 24 to 27, they're very good. At 26, you see a steep decline in production.
We see a lot of running backs come into the league and make an instant impact like Eddie Lacy has on the Green Bay Packers. That would not be the same team if they did not have that running game. All right, and now we look at the Indianapolis Colts. What are they missing? They're missing a running game. They thought they got it with Trent Richardson, but they haven't. And that just shows how much a difference a running game can do. And look at the Dallas Cowboys. Until DeMarco Murray stepped up, they were nothing. They were
Well,
one of the worst teams in the
That's because he was in a competition with Felix Jones to try to get that spot. Yeah. But another example, the New England Patriots. They've never done it with a star running back. They've had Jonas Gray throw in a game two or here or there, Shane Vereen, and now it looks like they finally found their guy.
But they couldn't do it.
But
they couldn't do it without the running back position. That's what I'm trying to say. Is as much as we want to pass in the NFL today, you still need a guy that can get you the yards on the ground.
So we'll agree that the position's valued, but you shouldn't pay them that much?
We can meet in the middle there.
Okay. Fine line. The AFC East finally got a whole lot interesting this week. On Friday, the New York Jets acquired former Pro Bowl wide receiver Brandon Marshall. And over the weekend, the Miami Dolphins reportedly struck a deal with star defensive tackle Ndamukong Suh. Can the AFC East, I can't believe I'm even saying this, become the best division in football?
You don't even have to say it because the answer is no, flat out no. You look at the teams in the division behind New England, the Jets, the Bills, the Dolphins, they don't even have surefire answers at quarterback right now. The Bills are relying on E.J. Manuel, and they're trying to get maybe some veteran quarterback like a Matt Castle. They're relying on a trade for Matt Castle right now. And the Jets are going into next season with Geno Smith still as their answer at quarterback, and maybe Ryan Fitzpatrick.
It's a quarterback-driven league, that's for sure, Preston. I think Ryan Tannehill is going to be really great. He's only been playing the position for 5 years. He has huge upside, and I think the Miami Dolphins, I really like the moves that they made this offseason, and I think they could be very good. But if you look at the other leagues or divisions in this league, the NFC North, NFC West, AFC North, they're not going anywhere. And they have star powers at QB. Russell Wilson's, you see Nick Foles go to St. Louis. Maybe they emerge finally as a contender if he can stay healthy. You have tons of Super Bowl contenders in the NFC North and the NFC West.
AFC East, I still see one playoff team. NFC West, I could see four teams going for the playoffs this year, and that's the big difference. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver is considering lengthening the association's 82-game schedule, giving more time in between games. This would, in theory, make the NBA playoffs finish in July. While some front offices would welcome a less stressful schedule, several spoke out against this, including San Antonio Spurs coach Greg Popovich, who's not shy. Would lengthening the NBA schedule be a good or bad move for the league?
First and foremost, I'm pretty shocked that Greg Popovich, of all people, goes up in arms about this because Adam Silver directly said, I'm going to do this to eliminate back-to-back games and playing 4 games in 5 nights, which is why he rests his stars in the first place.
How does that help, though? Because your stars are going to still have to play over that course of time.
I mean, you get a little more traction with your legs. You're going to be able to fresh, and I think you're going to see more competitive games in general.
The difference is minimal, and where they're really going to hurt here is their fans. Okay, the fans are already growing tired of having to watch for over 3/4 of the season. And as a guy that watches every night the regular season, I can't take it anymore. I can't take a schedule that goes all the way to July.
You can take a break, go on a nice date, go to the movies, do something in between those games. I can't do
a season that goes from October to July. Well, that is way too much.
When the move's going to be made is 2016, when that new TV deal for the
Pop,
NBA kicks in.
You're my boy, Pop.
That is all the time we have for the starting 5. Coming up, we preview the most impactful games to the NBA playoff picture.
You can hear it beckoning. What's that? That's right. The NBA playoffs are near. Here to help you down the home stretch are NBA experts Andrew Zung and Eric DiStefano. With playoff spots up for grabs, which games will have the biggest impact on the playoff picture? Andrew, we'll start with you in your first game.
Well, I think my first game's April 5th. It's going to be the Indiana Pacers at home against the Miami Heat. And this is going to be a big game just because right now these teams are surprisingly outside the playoff picture, 7th and 8th seed possibilities, but also wise because one of these two teams could be upset material. If Paul George comes back for the Pacers or if Dragic and Wade start going off for the Heat, they could really make some noise against a 1st to 3rd seed type team.
Yeah, definitely. I agree, and I like that pick. My first game is April 1st. It includes the Los Angeles Clippers playing at the Portland Trail Blazers. And the thing that makes this game interesting is that Blake Griffin will probably be back for that game. He's nearing a return. And Portland currently leads the Los Angeles Clippers by 1.5 games for that 4th seed. And the 4th and 5th seed matchup is always interesting. And I think in that matchup you want to have home court advantage, and the 4th seed would have that advantage. So I think this game could be a major player in terms of who has home field advantage in that game. And both teams are excellent at home as well.
Big game there in Portland. Let's move along in the calendar. You're staying in the Western Conference with this next game. A big one, too.
Yeah, so for my game, it's going to be on April 7th. And this is when Oklahoma City plays at San Antonio Spurs. And this is going to be a huge game. And the reason why is another surprising thing. These are the 7th and 8th seeds. And one of these two teams, they want to be the 7th seed. You'd rather play the Grizzlies than play the scorching hot Golden State Warriors, who are 27-2 at home.
Agreed.
And plus, I mean, you see the Spurs and Thunder. This is a good matchup for both these teams to really get ready for the playoffs and see which team can make another run. Because coming into the season, both these two teams were really contenders and favorites, along with really the Warriors, so the top 3 in the West.
So my second game is actually on the same day as yours. It's also April 7th, and it includes the Charlotte Hornets playing at the Miami Heat. And this kind of touches on your first game. It's that competition for the 8th spot. Currently, Charlotte leads Miami by a half a game for that 8th spot. And this game is really important because you have one team that's kind of getting healthier in the Charlotte Hornets. They're going to get Kemba Walker back. And then you have another team, the Miami Heat, who's kind of beat up at the moment. So I think it'll be an interesting matchup. And then also, this game is really huge because of the teams or the games that they have remaining after that. Charlotte, after that game, plays Toronto at home, Atlanta on the road, Detroit on the road, Houston at home, and that's a back-to-back, and then
really
Toronto on the
games.
road. But Miami only has Chicago at home, Toronto at home, and they have Orlando and Philadelphia. So it's significantly easier.
Absolutely, more tough games to come. Both y'all picking Miami Heat games. Obviously, this means there's a lot of pressure on them down the stretch here. But let's go back to the Western Conference now for your last game.
So my last game, it's on April 10th, and it's going to be the Phoenix Suns at New Orleans Pelicans. And the reason why I picked this game is because while both these two teams are the 9th and 10th seed, they're outside the playoff picture a little bit. One of these two teams could catch on fire, and if they do, could they possibly then really kick out the Thunder or Spurs for one of the picks? And that would be huge if they creep into the 8th seed. And then also with both teams, they could use their young players to get adjusted. And plus, who wouldn't want to see the eyebrow man himself, Anthony Davis and the Pelicans, bring back playoff basketball to New Orleans and try to make a little bit of a run, or just get him used to the atmosphere since he'll be a perennial MVP candidate down the line.
It's a long shot.
That would definitely be great, and I'd love to see that. But my final game is on the last game, or the last day of the season for both teams. It's April 15th. The Washington Wizards travel to Cleveland and play the Cleveland Cavaliers. And the Wizards are just 3-7 since the All-Star break. They're kind of reeling at this moment in time. They're now in the 5th spot, and they're just 2.5 games ahead of Milwaukee, and then they're 2.5 games behind Chicago. So this is a huge game for them. And one really important statistic, they're just 5-13 on the season when playing on the road against current playoff teams as of this date.
Not a statistic you want to
So
have.
it's a game
either.
they need to win.
Wizards sliding, Cavs rising. This is a game that could have playoff implications on the very last day of the season. Well, these games aren't the only big games coming up in basketball, because coming up next, our college basketball experts take a look at the conference tournaments that will decide who's dancing and who's not. Stay tuned.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
No thanks, Dad. I got it.
Okay. I'm gonna go fix the lamp in your room.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of children in foster care who will take you just as you are.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course.
Bracket busters have already punched their tickets, but conference tournament time is upon us, and for the big boys, it is time to break it all down. Let's get to it. Julian Council, Alex Ofuri. Let's start in the city of brotherly love. Temple currently sits square on the bubble and is a 4 seed for the American Conference Tournament, and will open up against Memphis with a chance to play the regular season champion, SMU, if they advance. What does Temple have to do to feel comfortable on Selection Sunday, Alex?
Well, first of all, they can't lose to Memphis. And then I think they don't necessarily have to beat SMU, but they have to at least play a close game with them, make it look good. Because you look at Temple, and their only real signature win this season was that game against Kansas. And other than that, they've been sort of pedestrian in terms of that. And another thing is the American isn't really a great conference, so you can't really depend on them to get a third team in there with, Cincy and SMU is probably locks at this point.
You
So
know,
they really
Alex,
have
I
to
mean,
prove
with the
themselves.
RPI top 50 record of 2-7 and the Kansas one, like you mentioned, the only way to actually feel safe when you're on a bubble in Selection Sunday is to win the conference tournament. A loss to Memphis, they're not in. Beating SMU, getting the championship, it could help, but the only way to feel safe, you got to get that trophy.
All right, we heard it here first. They got to win that trophy. I'm going to agree with Julian. Purdue, Indiana, and Illinois are all fighting for tournament spots in the Big Ten tournament, which opens in Chicago. Which one of these teams do you think has a real chance to advance and showcase their abilities to the committee, Julian?
I would say Illinois, but I don't think they're going to get in either way. Right now, Indiana is been on a collapse right now. Tom Crean, he's on the hot seat. They need to win games, but they have a chance to do it. They're right there in Lenardi's last 4 in. I think if Indiana can get some key wins, they can be in the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a team like Illinois, they are squarely on the bubble, and I'm going to go with them because they really need to win the conference tournament because, you look at Indiana and Purdue, while they have had their struggles, they've at least proven themselves against some more quality teams than Illinois has. I mean, they really haven't shown much. They're only 3-6 against the top 50 RPI, 5-11 when you spend that to 100. So they're not really beating anybody, and Ravonte Rice just came back. Maybe that can help them make a run. If not, then they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I really like Indiana. Tom Crean's certainly feeling the pressure, especially after hearing chants of fire Crean at his son's basketball game the other day. Let's move to the SEC, and no, we're not going to talk about Kentucky because they're firmly locked, probably with that #1 overall seed. Texas A&M comes into the SEC tournament as a 5 seed and will play LSU, who they've currently beaten twice. However, LSU has better RPI and BPI. Would a playoff game between these two teams be a de facto game to determine which one gets into the tournament, Alex?
I don't think so. I think LSU is in either way because you look at it, and they have their top 50 RPI wins with 5, and they even gave Kentucky a run for their money, really. Almost had them at the end there. When you look at A&M, they haven't really done anything to distinguish themselves, and you look at the only top 50 RPI team they have beaten is LSU, which they've beaten them twice, and that doesn't really prove much. But if they do sweep them, I think LSU has to definitely worry more about their seeding.
I don't think LSU has to worry at all right now. They're pretty firmly locked in. They beat A&M. They're getting in. A&M, they're 2-6 against the top 50 RPI. And like you said, only team that they beat in the top 50 is LSU. Now, if they win the game, they're going to have to beat Kentucky, which is not going to happen. So I don't think A&M's getting in regardless.
So Kentucky, regular season SEC tournament, undefeated. We'll see about March. That's a shot clock violation for our conference tournament preview. Coming up next, Preston and our NFL experts.
We have officially begun the new NFL year, and some teams are looking to fill multiple roles on their rosters. NFL experts Nick Markunis and John Roddy are here to help those teams fill those holes. You have 3 options to fill out those needs, either by free agency, the draft, or promotion. Guys, we're going to start in Atlanta with the Atlanta Falcons. Who are they looking for as a new running back after the departure of Steven Jackson?
Well, I think there's a pretty good market of free agents out there, and it's a bit of a stretch, but I say why not make a splash in Atlanta? Why not go after the leading rusher in the NFL? Get DeMarco Murray. You need a little star power. Just get something Atlanta excited about. It's been a while since they've really, they had their competitive phase and they've kind of tailed off. About that, Preston.
Absolutely.
But what really sticks out to me is he has 2 points, averages 2.7 yards after contact. So he got a lot of credit for that offensive line he was running behind, but he can run with a shoddier offensive line, which Atlanta has.
My problem with going out with free agency, though, is at what cost are you going to bring DeMarco Murray in? And I'm really big on the draft. I grew up in Houston as a Texans fan. Gary Kubiak brainwashed me to love the draft. So that's why I'm going to go with drafting either Melvin Gordon or Todd Gurley, one of the two. Todd Gurley a little iffy for me because he's had injury problems and off-the-field problems. Right. But I think going with the draft in terms of running backs, you look at the great running backs in the NFL, bar DeMarco Murray. All of them came in the 2nd or 3rd round of the draft.
A lot of value to be found there.
Yeah.
So y'all both think they need significant upgrades at the positions. Hey, Devontae Freeman's still on the team. I think he has a pretty good shot. Another team trying to replace a veteran that was cut is the Green Bay Packers. A.J. Hawk, their longtime middle linebacker. How do they replace him?
Again, sticking with the draft, because I feel like in this position specifically, the linebacker position, there's a plethora of options in the draft, even in the later rounds, because I feel like this position is more about how athletic you are as opposed to how good you are on the technical side of things. So I'm going to go with Eric Kendricks out of UCLA. He's a late draft pick, which is perfect for the Packers, who will be drafting late. He's around 35, 36, that mark. I think if they can pick him up in the draft, well, certainly fill that position.
Kendrick's very athletic. I'm a little worried about his size, and I think there's sometimes some transitional period for defensive players adjusting to the speed of the NFL. I say why not, again, make a splash, go after Brian Orakpo. I think you might be able to get him for a discount after coming off that injury. He's definitely had injury problems, so maybe sign him to a 2-year contract, see what we can do. He's just coming. He still has potential to be in the prime of his career, so he might partner well there.
I'm liking this. Eric Kendricks, I'm really high on him. Great in pass coverage. But another big trade that went down last week was Brandon Marshall being shipped away to the New York Jets. And now the Chicago Bears must replace him and get some support for Alshon Jeffrey. Who do they replace Brandon Marshall with?
Well, John, I think it's rubbing off me. I'm going draft here. I think this is a very deep draft for wide receivers, and there's going to be a lot of potential for the late round steals there. Maybe not even one that sticks out to me is Dorial Green-Beckham, who might, character issues might force him into the later rounds. If he's not there, I like Devin Funchess from Michigan, big, tall, 6'4" target that really could step into that role and kind of fill
Keep
with
the
Brandon.
size of the receiving core.
Agreed. I think that the Bears also have a lot of problems, though, aside from wide receiver, and I think that as a team that doesn't need to focus as much on the wide receiver position as other teams do, Alshon Jeffrey being promoted to that #1 wide receiver role is a huge move for me, because in the NFL, I think the best receivers are the big receivers who don't have as much speed maybe, but they have great hands, able to bring down any type of catch that you want. Alshon Jeffrey is that exact type of receiver, Calvin Johnson-esque, that can really go up and get a ball. I'd love to see him promoted to #1 receiver.
They also have a sneaky receiver that can fill at the #2, Marquise Wilson. But the Washington Redskins defense finished in the bottom third of the NFL, and now they think it's time to cut ties with one of their best players, Brian Orakpo.
Right.
So how do they fix that hole after they were already poor on defense in the first place?
Well, this is one of the most easy choices, in my opinion, in the NFL. The Redskins have the #5 draft pick, and there are 2 linebackers that are going to be drafted in the top 10 that they will be able to get, and it's Vic Beasley and it's Dante Fowler Jr. Either of those guys they can go with, and they will be perfectly fine. And when you get linebackers traditionally in the NFL and you draft them in the top 10, they turn out pretty good.
Generally, that's a pretty good track record. I like a player they already have in-house. Trent Murphy, he was hurt last year, put on injured reserve from Stanford, but he has just an absolute motor. This guy is as hard a worker as you'll find. I think he has a familiarity with the system that he'll be able to step in. He's known more for his run-stopping ability, but at Stanford, he was putting up double-digit sacks. I think he might be a guy that you give him a little time, he might be able to produce there.
Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with staying in-house sometimes. In the draft, they got a lot of needs, so we'll see what they do. Washington Redskins, certainly a case to watch. There is no telling how this free agents period will go, however, but each team hopes to be retooled before next season. Our NHL experts are in the midst of their season, and coming up next, they'll answer some hot topics on the ice.
RBIs and 36 homers. Swings at the first pitch and fouls it deep back into the stand.
Chill raw and prepared foods promptly. 1 in 6 Americans will get sick from food poisoning this year. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov. Separate raw meats from other foods by using different cutting boards. 3,000 Americans will die from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
Get caught buzzed driving, and you could do some hard time.
Craig, knock it off.
Sorry, Mom. It could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. And that could set you back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
The NHL season is slowly climbing towards its climax, and a plethora of intriguing storylines have emerged thus far this season. Ben Greenberg, Cam Cicelsi joining me at the debate desk to answer a few burning questions. First, let's start off with a few division leaders. The Ducks, Preds, Canadiens, and Isles are within 4 points of each other on top of the NHL standings, which means they're all competing for the illustrious President's Cup trophy. Cam, who's going to take it home?
So when I'm looking at regular season teams and when I'm looking at regular season success, I'm looking at teams that have players in the primes of their career.
Right.
You know, they're old enough that they have experience in the league, but they're young enough they're still, physically at the top of their game. The Ducks The Anaheim Ducks have 10 of these players.
Solid team.
You know, Bruce Boudreau is going to be pushing this team into the playoffs. He wants that President's Trophy and that home ice advantage, and I think they're going to get it.
And they play great at home, so that's a good point. But I honestly think the New York Rangers are the best team in the NHL right now. Hear me out. They're 4 points behind the Ducks and Predators for best in the NHL. They're also the hottest team in the NHL and have played 4 games fewer than each of these teams.
Okay.
They're 11-2-3 in their last 16 and have a plus 43 goal differential, which is 30 better than your Anaheim Mighty Ducks. Come on.
You know, when you're talking about the Rangers, I love what they've done, you know, in the past couple weeks. But a lot of that is riding Cam Talbot and how hot he has been, the goaltender for the Rangers.
Yeah, he has been great.
You know, I just don't see him sustaining it. And with the Ducks and their experience, I think they're going to get the President's Trophy.
I just think when your goal differential is that high, things are bound to go your way. I think pucks are more likely to bounce your way.
They're playing two-way hockey, great two-way hockey, don't get me wrong. Cam Talbot's been unbelievable, but just looking at their schedule down the stretch as well, I think the Anaheim Ducks just have a better shot.
Well, if Cam's this hot during the playoffs, expect a lot of success for the Rangers. I'm going to side with Cam and Anaheim on this one. Let's move on, though. Which team currently sitting outside the playoff standings has a chance to sneak a spot in there?
I like the LA Kings here. It's a combination of the Kings being great and also the Winnipeg Jets struggling. They've lost 5 of their last 10. Now, first of all, the Kings have a league high 13 games that they've lost in an overtime or shootout. That's just bad luck. I mean, that really is. And once that luck starts to change, things are going to go a lot better for this team.
Yeah, you take half those games, even half those games, throw them the other way. They're a playoff team already.
Exactly.
You know, we've seen this the past 3 years. The Kings sneak into the playoffs, and then they dominate.
Yeah.
So I totally see the Kings getting in. If any team can, I think it's the LA Kings.
And of course, that 8th seed, they're able to win a Stanley Cup a few years ago. Lastly, though, the 2 last-place teams in the NHL are currently the Oilers and the Sabres. Both teams are obviously winning that #1 overall pick to get Connor McDavid, who's seen as a franchise-changing player. Cam, why is he such a good prospect?
You know, what can you say about Connor McDavid that hasn't already been said? I think the most telling is Sidney Crosby, arguably the best player in the world, said, he reminds me of me. And that's exactly right. Connor McDavid is an elite skater, an incredible playmaker with a great scoring touch. He's the kind of guy that you put the right pieces around and you win Stanley Cups and you build a dynasty.
First of all, that Crosby comment, I mean, that's exactly what players don't like about Crosby. I mean, he reminds me of me. It's a little arrogant. Anyway, yes, Connor McDavid has a filthy highlight reel. Go watch it online. It's amazing. But you're not just going to cruise into the NHL, dangle past these top defenders, and be sniping water bottles off the top shelf of goalies, right? It's not going to happen. However, here's what makes him so great. Scouts say that even with this guy's insane skill set and freestyle moves, he's still fundamentally sound. He's a team player with great vision on the ice, and that's what makes him special. I think he'll be outstanding.
And the other thing, he's a young guy coming into the league. But he's been playing against older players his whole career, and he's been successful against older players.
Big advantage for him as well. He's a lefty. That's all the ice time we've got for tonight. But coming up, Preston and I weigh in on the NBA MVP debate.
It might be the biggest race of the year. No, not the Daytona 500 or the Indy 500 or even the Kentucky Derby. We are talking about the NBA Most Valuable Player race, and experts from around the country are giving their opinions. So naturally, Steve and I decided to give our take on the race. Steph Curry, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, or could it yet again be LeBron James, the king? Steve, who do you have as this year's MVP?
When my friends and I are fooling around, we always say, what would Russ do? As in Russell Westbrook. But this week, it's been, what can't Russell Westbrook do? 10 games in a row, averaging a triple-double. The first person since Michael Jordan, speaking of which, to do that in over 50 years. Most All-Star Game points since Wilt Chamberlain. This guy is an absolute tear, and he's the only reason why the Oklahoma City Thunder are sniffing playoff contention.
There's no doubt he's had a great season, but there are 2 sides to the equation. There are stats, and there's team wins. How much is your team winning? And right now, LeBron James has the edge in wins, and he's also not that far behind in stats right now. So I really think if you combine both sides, which I think you have to do in every MVP discussion, LeBron James is still right there.
The one thing I love about LeBron James is he gets really irritated that he's not the MVP because he says this should be for the best player in the league. And there's always 2 sides to this debate. I think it's what player does the most to help his team. And obviously it's Russell Westbrook. People are saying that this guy has been the most unguardable offensive player since Allen Iverson, and that's saying something.
Let's just say, though, LeBron James and the Cavs, they did not start that streak until LeBron came back from injury, and now they're looking what could be the Eastern Conference champions.
That is all the time we have, but if you've missed anything or want to watch it again, be sure to check us out on our YouTube page at youtube.com/101sports.
Also, make sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 101 Sports.
As always, thanks for joining us, and remember, until next time,
whose side are you on? This guy.